Hey guys, welcome back. So as a follow-up to last week's video, I wanted to do a list of my most difficult houseplants. I asked a question on my Instagram story as to what people wanted to see this week, and some people just wanted like chill plant chores and propagating and things like that, which I like to do, but they end up being really long videos. And the other half of you wanted to see plants that struggle or plants that I find difficult, or you want me to roast my plants. And I guess that makes sense because I'm kind of like a struggly kind of person. So I thought I'd do that today. This is generally a highly requested video anyways because people want to see like what plants I struggle with and why I struggle with them, just to keep it a little bit more true to real life. And I'm happy to oblige. I thought it'd be nice to add a little section to each plant that kind of explains anything I've learned about the care of the plant through the struggle. I have a list of 10 plants. Not all of these are like impossible to grow. Some of them are for me. Some of them are just impossible for me to grow nicely. And they are growing, but they're just not growing in a very healthy way. But for some reason or the other, I find it difficult to grow healthy, and I haven't quite tapped into what the plant needs. So yeah, that's about it. So I hope you enjoy seeing my ugliest plants. So first off, I wanted to start with a plant that I mentioned in my easy care plant video as a plant that I struggle with, that people tend to find quite easy. And I don't understand it. I'm inclined to think that it varies by specimen, and I will show you what I mean. This is my Philodendron milano chryson. Okay, so looking at this leaf, it's beautiful, it's large. I imported this, well no, I didn't import this, but I got this off of Jing, I want to say like 2 years ago, and this is the only leaf that has ever grown for me. So first of all, the 2 import leaves, I had these 2 beautiful, long, mature milano chryson leaves down at the bottom. They've both dropped off, probably because I gave up on this plant a good 6 months ago and stopped watering it, but I gave up on this plant because I'm just gonna show you what has been growing since it put out this leaf. Like, is this not as close to running as you've ever seen a philodendron do? It just went node after node after node without putting out any leaves. It's continuing to grow. I put out aerials and filled up this kind of like soil pole that I made for it. But other than that, it refuses to give me another leaf. I am very well aware that this needs attention. I just haven't been motivated to do anything about it. No other philodendron have I had that is like considered kind of standard aroid care has ever done this to me before. And you can see right now that the stem is quite wrinkly down at the base. This is not the reason for this happening because I kind of just started neglecting the watering on this plant after this whole leafless vine grew, so that's not really the reason for its general unhappiness. It's unhappy now because I don't water it anymore, but my plan for this is to get it onto a lazy pole, and I'm gonna chop it here and just let it revert back to juvenile and see where it goes from there. But it's just so sad because a large milano chryson was genuinely the top of my wish list a couple years ago, and I was so happy to have this one, but it just did not love me back. I'm tempted to grow this outside of the greenhouse, but it lives just here, right here in my tent. But that's what I plan to do with it. And I'm just gonna show you a smaller one. This is the kind of luck that I have with milanos in general. I just don't know. I want to say that I'm not great with philodendrons and I'm a little bit better with anthuriums, but even like thinking about that statement, I'm probably not good with either. So yeah, this is real life. This is what happens to my milanos. I just stopped giving a about them a long time ago because I love them so much and they just don't love me back. Okay, next up is another plant that people find really easy, but they freaking hate me, and it's another blow to my heart because they're genuinely some of my favorite plants of all time, and that's Monstera, deliciosa, specifically large form varieties. This plant was like the love of my life. I got this I want to say coming up to 2 years ago, and has never given me a leaf. So this I believe to be a Monstera deliciosa Brazilian common form. They're kind of characterized by really deep pennations. Obviously I only have one leaf to show, so I can't really show you more than that. If you hop on over to Charmaine's Instagram, you'll see her specimen has grown, I don't know, like 3 or 4 leaves, and it was propped from the same mother plant. This used to have 2 leaves. I've propagated it a few times and those stems have grown babies. I had this massive mother plant that I chopped into so many pieces. None of the rootless chunks made it. They all rotted to death. The only ones that made it were ones that had a root system already on them. And this part of the plant had a root system. All the roots fell off. I rerouted this plant at least 6 times, and you will see right now, we got nothing. I currently have this in water with an air bubbler, and you can see that like there's no sign of like roots forming yet. You can see the leaf that was in this petiole is rotted off. It's probably going to revert back to juvenile. There's nothing in this sheath now, it's empty. The stem is super wrinkly because I had it in like a layered propagation parfait, because that's how Charmaine rooted hers, and it's been in there for close to a year. It had roots. I took it out to inspect for rot because I thought it was rotting, but it wasn't. It was just brown roots. And then it decided, F you, I'm going to drop all my roots. This is what it's been like for a long time. We're starting over with water this time, just based on how extremely dehydrated it is. It wasn't able to get enough water from I had like pond perlite, like a parfait with moss at the top. It definitely wasn't getting enough water. You can see how shriveled the leaves are. So this is definitely one of the hardest plants I've ever owned. I think this is a characteristics of Brazilian common forms being like really hard to root and really slow growing compared to the regular large form deliciosas that we commonly find. But I'm not giving up because I love this plant to death, even though it is just barely hanging on for life. I've really tried everything. I've given it highlight, I've given it less light. I've gone to the point where it was like root bound in this giant pot. Every time it gets moved, all the roots drop, and it's the most frustrating thing, but it will forever be one of my favorite houseplants. I just never show this plant because of how sad it is. And then another large form Monstera I wanted to talk about, Monstera constellation. So this is my main plant. I got this a couple of years ago. It was semi-mature at that point. It had like fenestrations. It wasn't to the point of having secondary fenestrations, but every leaf that I grew from it was juvenile. So this grew from a fenestrated top cutting, this grew, and then this grew. So I was like, okay, screw this. I'm going to start over because it looked kind of stupid with like fenestrated leaves at the bottom and like all these juvenile leaves at the top. So I cut that plant up. Those propagations took, they grew, so I've sold them on, but I find this plant so difficult to grow. I'm taunted constantly by people on Facebook saying, oh, I got this plant in the fall and now look at how big it is, and they're just like these massive specimens, and I'm just stuck with this that doesn't want to grow. It's currently in my pond mix, pond orchiata and perlite. It's got tons of healthy roots. It seems to enjoy the pond. It rooted really quickly in here, but why won't you grow? This is supposedly an easy plant. And I will say it is tough. It is hardy to lower humidity, lower temperatures, and it's okay with less light, but are you gonna grow or? Let's talk about a plant that a lot of people have, but not a lot of people have nice ones of. Another one of the plants I love so dearly, but do not love me back. This is my Philodendron Pink Princess. This was a birthday gift from Jing and Charmaine and Aaron last year, and it was such a beautiful specimen, and it was growing nicely for a bit, but then like just look how just, I don't know if you can see, I'm gonna try to bump the light so you can see what the leaves look like, but it's just so wonky and ugly. And why Pink Princess, even if you're growing them in like 90% humidity, always get their leaves stuck. So this is a leaf that beheaded itself getting stuck coming out of the sheath. I know people are gonna say I need to pull for this, but so many of these like majestic like specimens on Instagram, I'm gonna pop a photo here, they're not on poles. How are they able to do it? I don't really understand. I mean, it's maybe in need of an upsized pot, but it doesn't want to size up. In fact, the leaves are getting smaller. If you compare one of the original leaves to the leaves now, like look at this compared to this. So the nice thing about this is that since I moved it out of my Millsville cabinet, so if you watch my Millsville cabinet refresh, this used to live in there. I moved this into the tent, so it lives just up the top here. The leaves have kind of moved forward like this. So it used to grow kind of 360. So I think it can be pulled now. Before it was just too difficult with leaves growing out the back, but that's a plant tour I will get scheduled for myself soon, and I'll try to get it on a pole. But other than that, I'm not really sure how to size these up. If anyone has any advice on how to get Pink Princess to grow nicely and healthily, this kind of seems like a nutrient thing, but I feed it with every watering and I've inoculated it with mycorrhizal fungi. I don't really know what else to do. So what I've learned about Pink Princess care, not a heck of a lot, but if it's asking for a pull, I will pull it. So next up is a plant that was actually impossible for me to grow. This is my Philodendron linhanoniae. So you're not seeing a plant right now because it's fully dyed. So I'm gonna scooch over a little bit so I can put a little photo here of what it looks like. I imported this plant just over a year ago. I knew about where it came from, which is like the Highland cloud forests in Ecuador, and I knew that those are very specific conditions that do not match my greenhouse and the care requirements of most of my aeroids, but I wanted to give it a shot. So if you don't know about the cloud forests, they're very high elevation, obviously. They're incredibly high humidity, like 100%. There's just like mist falling on the plants all the time. But the main thing is that there is a big temperature drop at night. I've read that, and this might not be true, but I've read that this temperature drop helps to slow down the metabolism of the plant, and if it's just given warmth all the time, it will just melt away because it's just like wasting away, exerting too much energy. So knowing all these things, I thought I was prepared to import this plant and get it growing. I've seen it done before, not by many. It's known to be an incredibly difficult plant to grow, but I wanted to dabble in Highland species, so I imported this. It was beautiful. Granted, it might not have been the best time to import this plant. I imported it in spring of last year, and then we went into like the hottest summer in all of history, like rivaling Saudi Arabian temperatures in BC. So it was probably the worst set of circumstances to import this plant, but I wanted to try. I kept it in an acclimation bin, and I lined the bottom with moss so it'd be full 100% humidity in there. I was opening it up to air it out all the time. I was freaking putting ice packs in there to keep the temperatures low at night. I was changing it out every day. It started to root. I had it in, I believe it was leca with moss on topping. It was rooting, but every leaf was yellowing and then melting off. So I was like, okay, so this ice pack idea is not working. I hadn't heard anyone else doing this. I didn't have the resources to build a proper cloud forest environment for it. I've heard that people use like wine coolers to grow these Highland species. I just didn't have the resources for it. So eventually, when it became a leafless stump, my last ditch effort was to give it to Erin. Erin at the time lived inside a very cold air-conditioned apartment. Her boyfriend likes to keep the air conditioning blasting, and to be honest, I should have given it to her from the start, but I didn't. So my learnings from owning that plant is don't even try with cloud forest species unless you live in a place with like a really cold basement that you can set something up and it's going to drop, like ideally I read below 20 degrees, but ideally around the 15 degree mark, and I'm talking about Celsius. it's just not gonna happen. I'm not gonna try again with Linhanoniae. Like, I don't want to contribute to anyone like collecting these from the wild and selling them because there's a market for it, just because I want to try. Like, I tried and I won't be trying again. Next up is another plant I no longer have. This is my beautiful Homalomena SP Sumatra, red Sumatra. I'm not really sure what it's going by lately. This was a plant that I loved so much and I want to get it again. I had it in moss the whole time I had this plant. It was growing happily for a while. It was living in my exo, which is not like the highest humidity, maybe around 60 to 70%. I was pretty good at keeping it watered. And then a couple of times I let it completely dry out due to like my busy work schedule, and it just never recovered. In hindsight, I was trying to grow this plant as like the majority of my aeroids, like philodendrons and anthuriums, but it needed something much more than that, and I needed to give it conditions closer to plants that grow near water. I should have been growing it like my alocasias, but I didn't because it seemed happy and it was short-lived, and I feel awful about it. I really want another one. That is one plant that I'm actively searching for. I haven't seen it for sale in a little while. If I were to do it again, and I will if I can, I would be growing it in pond with a good water reserve. I have another Homalomena that is growing in that. It's been growing happily. It's not that thirsty, but it does not want to dry out. All right, let's talk about some anthuriums. This is my Anthurium peltigerum. I imported this well over a year ago. It's never grown a leaf. It's inside this like layered substrate with leca at the bottom, perlite around the stem, and moss at the top. It's always been a one leafer. It has a giant like thick stem at the bottom. We have no roots. This is another plant that has like very specific conditions, and I'm not sure if it's a Highland species. It might be like mid elevation, but regardless, this is also known as a difficult plant to grow. They're a difficult plant to acclimate. I've imported this at least once before, and it was like just stunning, beautiful. It looked so healthy when I got it, and it just like all the leaves fell off and then it died. I was so sad about the first one when it died. Like, I was almost in tears in my plant room. My boyfriend felt so bad, and like we were at a garden center pretty soon after. He's like, "This is the plant that died. Maybe you can get this one." And it was a Pilea peperomoides, and that was really sweet. But anyways, I've tried to look up information on what this plant wants. Like, I've heard that it's incredibly difficult to root. I haven't heard like any key advice from people who have grown it successfully. I see like beautiful specimens, but there's not much information that I've found, at least, that help me to know how to root these plants and get it going. I've heard they like colder temperatures. I've heard they like super warm. I've seen a comment somewhere by Ivan Portilla, I think that's how you say his name, the owner of Equigenera, that they are hot growers, meaning like they like high temperatures. I don't know, like it's pretty freaking warm inside this tent and it doesn't want to do anything. So I've been planning to give this to Jing to let her have a try, but it's looked like this since I imported it. The only difference is that it started crisping at the tip and growth point died off. I guess like credit to this plant, it's still alive without any roots, and yeah, impossible plant. Freaking. I have 3 more anthuriums. Okay, so this one is Anthurium, they've changed the name now. It used to be, it used to be debilis and now it's debile, or it's the other way around. Anyways, this was a plant that was from Jing because she was having trouble growing it. I really love this plant and how it grows. I'm gonna pop a picture here of what a mature specimen looks like. Absolutely stunning. It reminds me a little bit of luxurians, reminds me a little bit of Dressleri, and the emergent leaves have these like kind of purpley veins. It's a really gorgeous plant. This is a difficult plant. So when I got it, I was unsure if I could grow it nicely because I didn't think I could give it the temperature and humidity requirements it needed, because I've heard that they need like 100% humidity and cool temperatures, and cool temperatures is not something that like I can provide in my greenhouses with like the lights. It's always warm. But I had also heard that they were found growing at the elevation of Variegated, which is like 25-30 degrees. So I was like, okay, I could probably do this. I've lost probably 2 leaves from it crisping off like this. And if you see this, this is like signs of dehydration, and it's just moving nutrients back into the plant. If you see it like at the tips and it's crisping up and it's not spreading like this yellow halo. So the same thing is starting to happen on this one, not as much as the previous leaves. So one thing I've figured out from this plant, based on people's advice on Facebook, is that these plants are found growing near water in basically like clay. So they seem to want a substrate that really hugs the roots, and it's quite dense. And I think that it has that with this moss. This moss is quite compacted. You can see how algae ridden it is. You can see that it's fairly well rooted. But the really big thing that I've heard is that this plant likes to be like sopping wet. Like, people are saying water it every 2 days, 2 to 3 days, and it seems crazy, but like, trust me, it works. So I've been following that advice. I've been watering it way more than any of my other aroids. I'm gonna try to keep that up and see what this next leaf is like, because I have one coming out here, and I'm gonna try to, I don't know if it will be better in soil, like a really dense soil. Possibly. I will build up this moss a little bit more to kind of cover this exposed stem here. So I'm not sure where that cut me off, because my camera overheated again and I went downstairs and had some toast. But I do need to keep this quick because I actually need to go to work after this. So I'm not sure where I left off with the debilis. Not the easiest Anthurium to grow, but if you keep the substrate nice and compact and really super wet all the time, maybe you have a chance. Maybe. Another difficult Anthurium. What even is this? This is Anthurium waterburyanum. I've had this for well over a year now. It grows constantly, and every leaf ends up like this. Granted, this one seems to have some sort of like mold growing on it. Not all of them end up like this. This one in particular seemed to have some fungal stuff happening. This happens. This looks like dehydration to me. You don't have like any fungal spots on the leaf or at the edges. It's really just at the tip here. They all do this, and it's putting out a leaf right now, and it looks super cute for a few weeks, and then after a while this happens. It lives inside one of my smaller exos, and that one is super warm, and it probably keeps at about 80 to 90% humidity on the constant, because it has this like moss layer at the bottom that I keep kind of hydrated all the time. So this is why this is happening. Any plants in drainage just end up rooting into the mossy layer at the bottom. So I'm probably gonna switch everything in the exo to no drainage, or have like a saucer underneath. But that's not the point. This has been an incredibly difficult Anthurium to keep pretty. Very similar to the debilis or debile. And I'm inclined to think that it might have similar requirements of wetness. So I've been watering this a lot more lately so that the soil is like bordering on wet. I haven't done the research into this plant. This one's a little bit difficult because I think what is being sold as waterburyanum out of Ecuador isn't always waterburyanum, so it's really difficult to pinpoint, yes, this plant needs this, because I'm not even 100% sure this is waterburyanum. That's just what it was sold to me as. It does resemble photos of the plant, but yeah, I don't know. What have I learned about it? Not really much of anything. It does seem to crisp up less in soil than it used to in moss. It might just be because this substrate is a little bit denser and heavier and can retain moisture a bit longer. I'm not really sure, but yeah, this plant is really freaking annoying. Okay, the last Anthurium I wanted to show. This was sold to me as Anthurium pendens. And I am not 100% convinced it's a pendens. This was being sold out of Ecuador. I've read that the majority of what was being sold as pendens out of Equiflora and maybe Equigenera is actually Anthurium Friedrich's thalii, so I'm not sure if that's what this is. But this, as you can see, has been a struggle to grow. One thing I will say about it is that it's incredibly fast growing. This was imported as a single leafer maybe a year and a bit ago, and it's grown like countless leaves. So many have died off, so I don't even know how. I'm gonna take a wild guess. Maybe it's grown a dozen leaves in that time, but you can see that this is the kind of leaf that it grows, and they don't really fully form. Look at this one, this one's fully hardened, like this. There's a couple of like nicely formed leaves. So what have I learned about this plant? It is incredibly thirsty, just like my Philodendron. It needs water every 5 days or so. It'll be bone dry in that time. It is a pendant anthurium, so it's eventually is gonna grow off the side like this. But it's one of the heaviest feeders I have. So what I've started doing lately is like really drenching the substrate whenever I water it, making it like just dripping wet. And I've been feeding it with a lot of CalMag. So the leaf that newly formed is not like fully symmetrical by any means, but it's way bigger. It did harden off fairly nicely. So this is fully hardened now. It's putting out a new one right now, right here, right there. If I didn't feed it as heavily as I did, it would just continue to grow like this. And it's not to say I wasn't feeding it before. I say all the time, I feed my plants with every watering. I feed a very, very diluted amount, but that diluted amount was not enough for this plant. So really, really hard plant to grow nicely. I do believe I have another one. A seller in Canada sold it to me as a Philodendron seedling a long time ago. This is like early 2020, and it's obviously not Philodendron. It's growing out just like this. So I believe I have two Friedrich's thalii. The other one is not doing this thing, but it is having trouble growing nicely, and it grows a lot slower than this one. That other one lives in my living room. This one lives inside this tent. So probably the tent conditions account for how quickly this grows, but oh my goodness, is this ever the heaviest feeder ever. I totally forgot to mention one plant. Okay, so this is not an extra plant. This is in addition to one previously mentioned. This is another one of my variegated large form Monstera deliciosas. So this was being sold out of a greenhouse in Vancouver as a Thai constellation. It's obviously not a Thai. They have quite yellow variegation when it comes out, but it hardens off to this like creamy color. And they were fairly cheap when they first released it. We have a suspicion that this was like a weird TC batch of Thais that they just continue to call Thais, even though it doesn't look like a Thai at all. This, like all other deliciosas, has been so difficult for me to grow. It's not difficult to root and get a nice root system on it. This is in pond/leca with maybe a bit of perlite in it. There's a little bit of, I don't know, I can't tell if it's myco or whatever, but there's some brown, but also quite a lot of healthy white roots. So I'm not touching this. I've had this for so long, you guys. I've had this for almost 2 years, and this is what I have. Like, it grows a leaf every 6 to 9 months, and they're so tiny and deformed. And it's not like I'm not feeding it. Like, I don't know why it's so incredibly thick, which makes me feel like it doesn't fully expand. I also see on Facebook people posting their plant from this weirdo batch of Thai constellations, and they're just like these massive specimens, and they're like growing in regular room conditions, and I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, I have not learned a single thing about how to keep these variegated monsteras happy and growing really massive. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like, Erin is the queen of growing really, really nice Thais, and her albos are just stunning. I don't really know what I'm doing differently to her. We're always talking about our plants together, and we bounce ideas off each other, and we kind of do what the other does, but for some reason, I just don't know. I just don't know. Okay, last plant I have to show. This is representative of kind of this whole genus and like all the plants within this genus that are in cultivation. Rhaphidophoras or Rhaphidophora, however you want to pronounce it. They're such bitches to grow. So I think this can be kind of represented by how ugly those TC tetraspermas are in nurseries, where they look like super shriveled up and they all have nutrient deficiencies. I think these tend to suffer from CalMag deficiencies a lot easier than other aeroids, but one thing I will say is that these are really difficult to root. So this one is a Rhaphidophora pertusa, very similar to tetrasperma, but kind of cooler in my opinion. They do form like cooler, sharper fenestrations, if that makes sense. I'll throw up another picture of one, a really nice one here, so you can see what this is meant to look like. So one thing I've learned about Rhaphies is that they grow a lot better in leca or like an airier semi-hydro substrate. So this one used to be in full-on pond, maybe with some tiny bits of leca in there, but it was overall too dense and it was growing super ugly. It just wasn't happy, and like all the leaves are just, it just wasn't really growing, and the leaves that came out were just kind of like tiny and disappointing. So I got this repotted in my coarser pond mix, the one I show all the time, with lots of coarse perlite and orchiata in there, and it kind of restarted itself. So I put out another profill. Maybe you can see right there, the tiny profill here, and then it restarted and the next leaf was fenestrated. So it does seem to be on the up. It is rooting nicely in this lazy moss pole. I did this in my kind of repot and chat with Charmaine, this video here, if you want to check it out. But anyway, so one plant that has been sold a lot in nurseries these past couple of years is the decursiva. And I know there are more people that hate this plant as much as I do. They look so stunning in the greenhouse. You bring it home, it's like, for some reason, the nurseries always have them like kind of like crawling laterally in the air and not letting them climb up a pole. They're almost like selling them as hanging baskets, and they're not running. They're fenestrating, they're looking beautiful and lush, and they're sizing up. As soon as you get into your house and you put it inside a really nice greenhouse, like Charmaine was growing hers inside of her exo, they immediately start running. Or they don't grow. I used to have two, and they didn't grow a single leaf for me. They were growing runners like a meter long. They're searching for something. I gave them the pole, I gave them the light, I gave them the feed, the water, and they just kept running and running and running. The Rhaphies are just so freaking annoying to grow. This and the tetrasperma, I have a couple that I believe are like the non-TC ones. They're like the nice round ones. These are the only ones I will ever keep. I do not want to see another one in my house. This one is probably gonna be my favorite if it keeps growing nicely. When I was throwing out my decursivas and like just raging on my Instagram stories one day, and everyone's like, put it in like they'd love it. I was like, too late, it's in the garbage. But from now on, I will be growing my Rhaphies in semi-hydro, specifically in a substrate that's like nice and chunky, and they seem to be enjoying that. So yeah, this one is a difficult plant. I seem to have figured out a bit of what it likes. Oh, Jesus. So this one is a difficult plant. I seem to have kind of figured it out, but you never know with Rhaphies. Like, sometimes for no reason at all, it'll just restart itself. It'll just abort a growth point, even though the conditions didn't change, you didn't miss a watering, and it'll just like start over again. You'll have this like kind of leafless section. Super annoying, but oh my goodness. There are people working on my roof right now, and it literally feels like they're in the house with me. It is so freaking spooky. Can you guys hear that? It feels like someone's stomping around in my house. Ooh. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed seeing my failures, and I hope that, oh my goodness, the whole house is vibrating. I don't know if it's vibrating the camera, but if it bounces, it's because people, oh my god. If you have other advice for people who also find these plants difficult, please feel free to leave it in the comments. If any of these plants are plants that you're just awesome at, I would love to hear it, especially for variegated large form monsteras or just large form monsteras in general. I would love to hear your successes and how you got your plant to thrive. But anyway, I gotta get to work now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please leave a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. I have an exciting video for you next week. I don't want to spoil it, but it involves a visit to a really well-known grower here in Vancouver. Yeah, and that's it for me today. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.